I call this meeting to order. This is a regular meeting of the Northfield Public School Board. Today is Monday, October 14, 2024, and the time is 6 p.m. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded. The recording of this meeting will be posted on the district website as soon as possible. Welcome members of the community here tonight to observe the important work being done on behalf of all school district stakeholders. Northfield Public Schools Policy 950 reads, the land acknowledgement statement will be read at the school board organizational meeting in January, at the school board meeting nearest Indigenous Peoples Day, and at Northfield High School and Area Learning Center senior graduations. As today is Indigenous Peoples Day, I will invite one of our district youth council members, Allie Matthews, to read the land acknowledgement statement. In 2020-21, District Youth Council's Equity and Inclusion Subcommittee, on behalf of the District Youth Council, proposed a land acknowledgement to be formally adopted by the Board of Education. Policy 950 was adopted by the Northfield School Board in June of 2021. Welcome, Allie.
The Northfield School District recognizes that we reside on the homeland of the Wapakute tribe of the Dakota Nation. We acknowledge the wrongdoings, previous and ongoing, and strive to repair and strengthen our relations with Indigenous peoples. Thank you.
Dr. Hellman, we have some items in the table file. Can you update us?
We do. In this evening's table file, we have just a handful of personnel items. There's a couple of appointments, a couple of increased, decreased changes in assignments, 2 leaves of absences, and 1 resignation. I also have included an updated copy of the 2024 MCA and attendance pilot overview presentation that was sent to board members just a little bit ago and included in the table file as well. Not a ton of changes, but there is an updated presentation for you.
Thank you very much. If there are no objections, we will add these items to the agenda as we move forward. Okay, is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented? Moved by Chet, second. Amy, thank you. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion passes. Val, do we have any public comment? Okay, that is item 4, public comment, and we don't have anybody signed up, so we'll go to item 5, which is announcements and recognitions. And I wanted to share a brief comment, and then I will have Dr. Hillman share any announcements or recognitions, and I'll invite board members also to share. In honor of Indigenous Day today, I wanted to bring attention to how this district is putting action to our land acknowledgement statement. We strive to repair and strengthen our relations with Indigenous people. In our district, 1.3% of students identify as Indigenous. The district, through our Indigenous Culture Liaison, Sybil Betzinger, helped implement the blanket ceremony as a district-supported convocation ceremony for our Indigenous high school graduates and their families. A blanket ceremony is often used in recognition of a milestone event. Blankets within Native communities have cultural significance. Besides symbolizing warmth and protection, during the blanket ceremony, the blanket symbolizes strength and protection for the high school graduate as they begin their new journey. District resources have been allotted for this culturally appropriate ceremony to be enjoyed by Indigenous district students and their families. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia. We have a couple of other announcements this evening. One, I want to point to board members that you have a copy of this community school report at your table place this evening. And the report details the results of the 10th year of community school programming. And this year it includes data from all 3 sites, Greenville Park Elementary, Spring Creek Elementary, and Bridgewater Elementary. You might remember we began this program only at Greenville Park Elementary 10 years ago. And the report has been shared with all elementary families and community partners. We want to thank everyone who assisted in the report's compilation. So just a copy for board members here, really well done. And again, we are so pleased with the progress that the Northfield Community School has made. And I'll highlight that a little bit in the State of the District presentation as well. I also want to congratulate Northfield School District grounds crew member Travis Pash. Travis earned the 2024 Facilities Award of Excellence for the MASM's Southern Minnesota chapter at the annual conference held on October 3rd, 2024. And just so MASM's is the statewide organization of educational facilities professionals. So it is Travis and Justin Robley and Tracy Clausen's professional organization. And so the award recognizes an outstanding facility worker who is not in a management position, and the person may be on the school custodial, grounds, or maintenance staff. And the award is selected from nominations based on 7 criteria that include an exemplary work ethic, stewardship of school property, brings joy to the team, is creative and takes initiative, promotion of sustainability and other sustainable methods, mentors others, and represents the community in a positive manner. So we know that Travis is outstanding. He just gets things done and he's pleasant to do with it. In fact, Travis, we've talked about goats. Travis is the goats that we have at the high school in the courtyard are Travis's goats because he's all in for the school district. And so we're so grateful for Travis and congratulate him on winning the Southern chapter of the MASM's organization's 2024 Facilities Award of Excellence. And so we'll have some things on our social media and share it in local other publications later this week and early next week. So congratulations, Travis. And those are our announcements and recognitions this evening.
Thank you very much. Item 6 is our items for discussion and reports. First, we have Director of Instructional Services, Hope Langston, to report the district's Minnesota Comprehensive Assessment, MCA, results, and instructional and systems coach, Carrie Duba, and provide an overview of the district's 3-year funded attendance pilot, state-funded attendance pilot. Welcome, Hope.
Good evening. Yeah, the whole thing. We are extremely happy to be here tonight to talk about these 2 key components which help us measure the effectiveness of our system. 2024 MCA results, while it feels like it's a little bit of a distant memory, April, the scores actually were released from embargo at the end of August. So this is your first complete view. You'll get another little bit of information about it in the World's Best Workforce, the final World's Best Workforce, before it transitions to a new report. And then Carrie's going to talk about our exciting attendance pilot that we are a part of. So here we go. So as always, we ground everything we do and start every meeting with our strategic plan, our vision, and our benchmarks and commitments, preparing every student. And I think it's really critical here tonight as we talk about these 2 metrics that we mean every student for lifelong success by developing critical thinkers who are curious and ready to engage in our society. And these metrics really help us know that whether or not as a system we are reaching every student and preparing them. So the MCA district overview with state context, you know that I don't want to ever look at MCA proficiency rates without that state context. It is a publicly available file in the MDE data analytics site, and it includes every school and district in the state. We, of course, sort for O1 districts testing 10 or more students. So I broke it up this year just so you could see trends in reading, math, and science separately. MCAs, as always, are kind of a mixed bag. We have some areas of wins. We have some areas of continued growth. The state and Northfield gained in the same number of metrics possible. So there's a lot of information on this table, but the proficiency rate, an increase, decrease, color-coded, the percent of districts with proficiency rates lower than ours, and then also our participation rate. And that's a newer column that was added last year, just so you have an awareness of what our participation rates are. Black meaning we are below the state average, and for 3rd and 4th grade, just understand that we were just a 10th below the district or the state participation rate. So those are our reading results. Again, when you see a proficiency rate in 3rd grade, for example, of 63.1, yet higher than 89% of districts, then that helps us understand how many districts are actually able to get into the 70s, 80s, and 90% proficiency rates. It's not a lot. So again, giving that wider context for what we're all trying to do in the state of Minnesota, which is move kids, teach them to read, and do math. But again, these proficiency rates at the state level give us some boundary for how we're all doing. Not to say that we're satisfied with that, but again, it provides a complete picture. Math, same thing. We saw some wins in 4th, 6th. Really, the middle school is what I wanted to highlight. After a couple years after COVID of seeing declines, we are finally starting to see an uptick in our middle school students. We are happy to see that. And we know that COVID was particularly hard on that subset of kids. So we were happy to see those gains. And again, I'm just going to point out 8th grade for the win. That was a cohort that came through, and math higher than basically 94% of public school 01 districts. So with a 65.8% proficiency. So that was a nice win for the middle school to see. We had worked with that team as part of the CIRC cycle, and we'll talk about that in action steps. You can see the participation rates in the high school do drop off, 78.2 at math for 11th graders. Still was above the state average. But again, we continue, along with many other districts, to think about ways we can engage our high schoolers in the MCAs. They are all in when it comes to the ACT. It's a little bit trickier when we talk about the MCA. And then our 3 grades that test science, 5th, 8th, and 10th. This was the first year of decline for our 5th grade science after 2 solid years since the implementation of the science special. This was a pretty significant decline at almost 10%. And again, this is a cohort that has come through our system that has been challenged to meet grade level proficiency in high numbers. We certainly saw that in their 4th grade results. So we were anticipating that we would see a decline this year. And all we can do is keep at it and look at what this year brings. We did make some changes to the science schedule this year, working with our principals to make it a little bit more streamlined for the preparation process. So we're hopeful that that's going to make a difference. So bright spots for us. 8th grade had the 8th highest proficiency rate in the state for science. And this was the first cohort, coincidentally, to have science as a special in grade 5. I'm not sure I can tease out the impact of that because they were the first 5th grade cohort to have it. But our middle school teachers do report seeing an increase in the amount of science knowledge our kids are coming to the middle school with, so we are happy about that. We did have some incentivizing at the 8th grade level for the science tests. We know that can make a difference, and we will continue to study how we do that and the best practice for doing that. But we are pretty proud of that 8th grade result this year. 6th grade math, this was the 3rd consecutive increase in FRP for proficiency since 2021. So we are happy to see that continued increase. And then the other thing I pulled out this year, just because I was curious, and Matt and I in our work with TNTP are talking about this 80% goal, and we talk about it with MTSS too, that we know that our system can function well when 80% of our kids are meeting grade level proficiency. It allows interventions to happen. It affects special education. So there's a lot of things that can happen from a position of strength when we can get to that 80% mark. So I wanted to just go through all of the metrics, all of the demographics. Where are we currently meeting that 80% goal? And these are the areas where we are currently meeting that goal. All non-FRP, which is our highest performing demographic, and all elementary, actually. So we know it's possible. Our work in Tier 1 is to broaden the achievement of that goal with other demographic groups, other grade levels, and other content areas. So just know that that's where we're at right now. That is a goal we're working towards always. And these were the bright spots this year. Areas for growth, you know, we talk about this persistent achievement gap, but it was a growth coupled with a win. So what you are looking at here are all grade levels since 2021. So COVID is our dividing line in reading. So that's 3rd through 8th grade and 10th grade. And you can see each line represents a demographic group, and there you see that FRP, non-FRP, non-free and reduced lunch group continues to be our highest performing demographic. Right beneath that is our white student demographic group. But I want you to look at the lower two lines, and yes, that gap exists, and yes, we are tackling it. But we actually had our 2nd year of increase in both the FRP student group and the Hispanic student group. So I think this is good. I'll say one data point is not a trend. 2 years, we'll take it, and we'll get back at it this year. But that is a win for us, and I think speaks to all the effort going into Tier 1, the effort of MTSS, the effort of our liaisons, the effort of getting kids not only to school, but feeling engaged in school. And so we think that this is a trend that will continue. So that's reading, and you see the same thing in math. So when I see it across 2 tests, multiple years, we know that we can celebrate this as a win. And so the gap exists. We have to continue to tackle that. But the upward trend of both of those demographic groups is a good sign for us. And then science, we saw the 2 years of upward tick in the Hispanic student group. We did see a slight decline in our FRP students. And that really can be attributed to that pretty dramatic 5th grade drop, and also our high school 10th grade science results. So where are we at in terms of action steps? Because that's probably the briefest MCA report. You know, there's a lot of places to dig in, and we do that with our teams. But that MCA is really meant to be a systems check that we would use at a broader level than the school level. So where we're headed as a district, as a system, is our TNTP partnership, which is helping us take a look at Tier 1 instruction across all of our buildings. So just last week, TNTP walked through 30 classrooms with district administrators and the instructional services team, looking at math instruction and the work that students are doing in their math classroom. We also continue our content and instructional review work across the district. This year we are working with our social studies teams, our world language teams, and they are starting social studies. We've started at the high school because of the legislative requirements, but world language we have not worked with yet, and that will be our last content area that we will begin this process with. We continue the process with other teams that we started, and that would be secondary ELA and secondary math. So that cycle, again, the purpose of that is for teachers to take time to look at their instruction, examine best practices, and look at the materials that they're using in their daily work with students. And related to that then is the adoption of high quality instructional materials. And we know there's a growing body of research is indicating that students achieve at a higher rate when the materials they have been constructed in a way that makes them coherent across grade levels. There's vertical alignment. There's coherence within the grade level and across grade levels. It's accessible to all students, students who might need EL support, students who might need reading support, and that, most importantly, our students are being presented with grade level material every day. They will not close the gap if they are being provided with materials that are below grade level. And so this high quality instructional materials is a focus of ours in this CERC work. And we believe that these action steps will lead to continued improvement in systems proficiency. We're going to do questions at the end, so I'm going to turn it over to Carrie.
All right. So we are thrilled to be part of this legislated Northfield, the attendance pilot. Northfield is one of 12 districts, and we are grateful for the opportunity to go after this very important metric that we know matters incredibly to the data that we were just looking at. So here is what the language is around that attendance pilot. It really exists for us to, without a lot of parameters, develop and implement strategies to improve student attendance. It's a little bit like do your best thing, keep great data on it, because we need you to do the investigative work for us. And the student attendance and truancy legislative study group is taking in a lot of that information. We testified to them, or we met with them early on to talk about our project, and other pilot groups are doing that, plus other interested organizations, just gathering all kinds of information about what is the best way to shape policy around student attendance, and we are grateful to be part of it. Now, I do want to point out on the left, not only are we fortunate enough to be one of the pilot districts, we are also a recipient of the second MTSS grant from MDE. And so our task, we were asked to make sure that we are explicit in how those two things go together, and they do go hand in glove. Our teams are looking at data all the time, including attendance data, and obviously these are not independent variables that we're looking at. Attendance influences student performance impacts attendance. So you can see how that all goes together. And I do want to point out there are 5 components that we look at attendance through. Our teams that are looking at data, our practices. When we are layering on supports for our students, we're layering on academic support, but we're layering on attendance support. We're trying to get the right formula to get our students to succeed who are the most at risk. Family engagement, I really want to come back to that and highlight that, because we cannot obviously do this without families. Assessment and database decision making. We are always evaluating our project and making decisions about what the next best step is to do by using the data that we have in front of us. So this will come as no surprise, I think, to any of us who are working in public education, but chronic absence has a huge impact on student performance. I'm going to get to this a little bit later, but Hope and I had a chance to share this data with parents, and it is really, really clarifying about the impact when you look at it. Now, I also want to point out, I am putting MCA data up there. I'm putting CBM data up there. It is unlikely you will see those exact numbers in any other context. I am putting all the data points together through the years and through the grades, because the only variable I wanted to pull out was attendance, right? So it's all combined so that you can see the impact of chronic absence on performance. Our students who are chronically absent tend to perform lower on their MCAs. They get lower scores on our curriculum-based measurements that we were doing through our STAR assessments. And the one that really, really shook our families when we showed them, and this happens every single grading period. So this is the most recent posted grades, and that was last spring. Students who are chronically absent earns Ds and Fs at 3 times the rate of students who are here all the time. It really takes a toll on their ability to engage in their classwork and to successfully complete it. And the other insidious thing about chronic absence is that it doesn't take much before an impact. It's 10%. We start labeling something as consistently 10% absent. And so in a month of 20 school days, that's only 2 days. They add up quickly. This is the information that we have to give families. Is it feels like a day here, a day there, but pretty soon you've reached the threshold that research has shown starts to impact educational performance in reading and math, and most importantly, how to be a student. Our students who are chronically absent report less connectedness than our students who are here all the time. We don't know the direction of that relationship, though. I think that's the other really important thing, is that that's bidirectional. Are they not coming because they don't feel connected? That's our work. That is our important work. Or are they not connected because they're just not here as often? So we're always looking at it with that lens. I pulled this data about a week ago, I think, and I checked this, and we're creeping up to 14%. But 13% of our students in our district are meeting the definition of chronic absenteeism at this point. This is a moving metric. Students can move in and out of that 10%. It'll drop off. They had pneumonia for 4 days, and they're sitting on our chronic absence even though they're here, and then they drop off after that 10%. And then you can see the distribution. This is a constant. We tend to see it a little bit higher in kindergarten because we see the impact of illness. And then you'll notice that in 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, we see a higher rate of chronic absence. This is where we have students who are making volitional choices about whether or not to come to school. We did some deeper data dives. We are very grateful to have a relationship with the Carleton Statistics Group. We gave them our attendance data over many years, and they pulled apart some themes for us. Our students of color are most likely to be chronically absent. Our multilingual learners are most likely to be chronically absent. Our kindergarten or secondary. And this was the biggest aha for Hope and me, if I can speak for you, Hope, is that low-income students, but it wasn't how we thought it was. The average rate of chronic absence for low-income students is quite high. But when we looked at it as the medians start to all pull into some congruence. So what we're really looking at with our low-income students are some really dramatic outliers. They tend to be our students that we reach our 15-day drop with. So that stuck with us because we thought that means something. And then the other thing is that we have family engagement navigators in the district. And so we are hearing from families via our navigators and our cultural liaisons, what are the barriers for attendance? Transportation is always one. Illness, lack of medical insurance, being new to country, academic challenges for the students and for parents who can't help. And so then students don't get their work done at home. There's an institutional belief that a family develops that school is not for them. And so they don't know how to encourage their student to be successful. Mental health concerns for students and their parents or their guardians. Limited awareness of attendance expectations. Families know they need to be here, but to be here every day feels a little bit like a bridge too far. But really, we need them here every day. And so making sure that that message is out there. And then lack of information about how to help their child. Hope and I did some focus groups, and we were sharing this data with families. And there's this one parent who said, I have 3 children, and I have one child who doesn't want to go to school. And when she lies down on the ground and starts to cry and I can't get her to the car, I can't get anyone to the car. So now we have 3 students absent, and I need help, right? They need help about how to help their students getting to school. So our family engagement navigators and our cultural liaisons have been super powerful, visiting our families, creating a different kind of relationship with the families, coaching them how to be students, coaching them on our multiple learning platforms, connecting them to resources that will remove barriers. So we do know that that's a model that works. In fact, we did look at the data, we did do some studying, and 25% of reduction in the number of students meeting the threshold for chronic absenteeism on their cohort list. And of the students in their cohorts, 75% did improve their rate of attendance. So we know that that's a model that works. So all of this information we put together when we had the opportunity to be part of this pilot. We reviewed our evaluation data for our Family Engagement Navigator. We reviewed our data from the Carleton Statistics Research Group. We looked at our MTSS attendance teams data that they are constantly pulling on their students. And we reflected on the information that we got from our family focus meetings. And here's what we learned. Families need help, families need information, then the family engagement model is effective, and we are lacking support at a secondary level. So this is how we came up with the plan that we proposed for our attendance pilot. We hired a 0.75 secondary attendance navigator to be available for home visits, parent groups, student groups. The navigator is meeting with the middle school and the high school team. She is concentrating on that 7, 8, 9, 10. This is a really vulnerable time, we know, students making that transition, not only from middle school to high school, but also independence in getting themselves to school. So developing those relationships at that point, connecting with students, and helping to develop our cohesive messaging plan. We'll talk about that in a minute too. Our second component of our district plan was supporting families. Research will show that family engagement and family training is some of the highest, the most effective strategies for helping families get their students to school, because we know how important that is. So one of the treatment, an anxiety treatment program that is out there that we are adopting in a broad, non-therapeutic treatment way is a program called Supportive Parenting for Anxious Childhood Emotions. What we have found in our data is that over the course of several years, our mental health concerns with our students has risen dramatically. And with that, students' attendance declines as the report of mental health concerns increases. What this research has found, and it's very robust and it's very effective, is that we have over-accommodated and we have lost the message that says, yes, we can support you with your mental health concerns. Yes, you are a student who is working through your mental health concerns, and you can be a student. And so that is the language that we are working with our social workers, our 504 coordinators, our case managers, and Sarah Pratt and I are also meeting with our Fernbrook school-based mental health providers for them to have their clinical workers also be working with this language around supportive parenting. It's clinically rooted, it's well-researched, and it's a great framework to start moving our families towards strategies that support and empower their students to continue to be in school. And then the last part of our plan is a cohesive and intentional communications push. We actually have a set of attendance newsletters, attendance information that is strategically mapped across the school year that we want to introduce into our district and building communications. It's developed through Attendance Works, which is the premier site, research group for attendance information. It gives information about our local data and the impact of absences, awareness about our policies, and it is consistent across buildings. So here's what we've done so far. We've presented, we meet monthly with the district pilot groups. We've consulted with the MDE data scientists. This is important. Attendance is not collected and reported the same way across districts. That is not what they're going to tackle at this point, but what they do want is to make sure that we have the cleanest data in our district possible. So we've gone back to our data reporting, our attendance reporting, to take a look at how we've done it. Hope did a huge dive into it about 5 years ago, before the pandemic, and we're just revisiting it And so one of the things that happened when we did that is, and this is really actually key for the MCA data that Hope just shared, is that we have not had a consistent language at elementary around tardy. So this is something that we wanted to tweak and to adjust. One of the things that we've noticed, we inform families when their students have reached a certain threshold of absences. We inform them differently when they've reached a threshold of tardies, but we haven't been able to put those together in such a way that it really explains to parents the impact that tardiness has. A lot of our students are arriving after the reading instruction has happened for the day, but they're at school, so they're not counted as absent. And so it misses the impact of that. They're, in effect, they've been absent from reading instruction. So if we can tweak the definition of tardy, students arriving before 9:30 a.m. are tardy, arriving after are half-day absent. At elementary building, and in the elementary school, attendance is divided into 2-period days. At secondary, if a student comes to first period more than halfway through, they are counted absent for that period. So we applied that same logic, roughly, to the elementary building. The student arrives more than halfway through that first period, the first half of the day, they're counted absent for that period, so they get a half day absent. Students leaving after 2 p.m. have left early, but students leaving before 2 p.m. are half day absent. What this means is the absence number will accumulate. And that's what we have our families pay attention to. It will move our students and it will help our teams have conversations with families, and will clean up the data for our teams if we can do that. So that's one of the things that we've looked for and that we are interested in getting shifted in our policy is that language. Our next steps in this is further development of our cohort for the liaison. We need to identify processes for increased family support using that SPACE model. We have 3 years of the pilot. We are going slow to build a solid pathway for families to get that support. Per the pilot guidance, we are developing robust progress monitoring and consistent data reporting strategies and bring it all into coherence. And then finally, we want to roll out our messaging. And that's where we have arrived at questions.
Thank you very much. Board members, do you have any questions for either Hope or Carrie at this point? Okay, Corey and then Rob.
Hi, Hope. Hi, Carrie. Thanks for being here. 2 questions just for Hope right now. Because you highlighted the growth in 8th grade math year over year by 10.1%, I'm curious, is that 10 percentage points or 10%? So was last year's cohort 2 years ago, would that have been 55.7 or roughly 59%? Just so we can understand the data growth.
That is, are you saying, is it a cohort growth or a year over year growth?
When you say 10.1% plus growth.
That's
is that
2023 8th grade to 2024. Yes, percentage
So it's
points.
55.7
Yep.
the prior.
Yes.
Okay. So I can have my bearings on that. Thank you. And then, let's see, what was my other question? Oh, with implementation of new curriculum, obviously it takes time to implement that. Students, it's new to staff. You're going to tweak it after year 1. Historically, how long do you take for those new curriculums? We have new reading, we have new math curriculum to kind of take effect before you will give judgment to it of how it's addressing. And there's a lot of variables. Students change every year, cohorts change, people come. We just heard about absenteeism, how that affects it. Is it 2 years? Is it 5 years? How long is that window?
I think that's a great question because curriculum is not inexpensive, is it, Val? And so what we are looking for is immediate impact. But the reality is, research would say that Matt talks about an implementation dip. Honestly, we don't have enough history with curriculum adoption in our district recently to be able to say that. But we have one example, and that was CCC, Center for Collaborative Classroom, that we adopted pre-COVID. We thought there would be an implementation dip, but there actually wasn't. We saw an immediate increase in year 1. Now, Bridges is a massive shift in elementary. And and mathematics instruction in general, just like the new science standards, is requiring a massive amount of new learning for our teachers and a different way to approach instruction. I'm not sure that we will see immediate impact. So I would say, to your question, which is an excellent one, while we might not see something in year one, I certainly would expect it to see something in year two. And really, when we talk about the implementation of all the structured literacy that we started last year, we are actually seeing differences in foundational skills. So that's not, doesn't necessarily show up in an MCA. It shows up in subtests of other assessments that we give. But what that will do is make sure that we're now not dealing with a, can I lift the words off the page problem? It's a, I might have comprehension. So there's a lot of things that come into play, but I would certainly hope that by year two of any adoption, we have learned it, and we are now implementing with some adjustment. So after year two, we would expect to see a positive impact.
And I want to highlight something you just said. I appreciate that you iterated. This is one data point, these
Mhm.
scores. So there's obviously 9 months of work with each student, and there's a lot of growth in areas that's not captured in this. And then I'm not going to let Carrie off. I do have one question. It's a real easy one, acronym question. So SBMH.
Oh, school-based mental health.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, Rob?
Thank you for your report. I'm just wondering, now that all students can get a free lunch, what FRP means now. I mean, how do you determine that if everybody is getting a free lunch?
So that's also an interesting question. What we've learned is that while the direct certification process, which, Val, what year did that go into effect?
Direct cert's been in place for a while, but the using the MA qualifier, I believe,
3 years?
I think this is the 3rd year.
Yeah.
Can you make sure you explain what we're talking about there? Because I don't
So-
think many people know what we're talking about with direct certification.
Do you want to go with that one?
Sure. So part of the free and reduced application process, families can come in and fill out a form. They can do it online, and we will process it. There's also a secondary process that if they qualify for any kind of, not any kind of, but Medicaid eligible services or any other kind of county or state assistance that meet whatever Stephanie would be the one to give you all the specifics about it, but there's a set of criteria that automatically qualifies you. So we get files from the state that say these kids qualify. They do not have to fill out the form, the paper form. They're just automatically qualified. So they're considered direct certified. During the pandemic, when lunches were free, it became a big issue because nobody was filling out the paper form. And so they did, this is our 3rd year now, where the Medicaid eligible piece is a direct cert, which dramatically increased the number of students that were qualifying for free and reduced. And so everybody's getting a free lunch, but there are other benefits associated with that status across the district. You get discounted activity fees and those sorts of things. There's several other things that go along with that, but that's what the direct cert process is when we're talking about it, is there's qualifiers that they are just kind of automatically certified. Does that help answer that question? Okay.
So our numbers have actually increased. So, and I was just looking at it with a high school teacher today. The high school's at 30% free and reduced lunch. We used to routinely see high teens, low 20s, because the FRP rate dropped off as kids moved through our system and didn't want to have their family fill out the form for them. So we have seen an increase because of that new process.
Amy, did you have a question?
Thank you, Hope and Carrie. Always love hearing from both of you, and I have questions for both of you. I'll start out with Hope because went first. So you kind of touched on this briefly, but my question is, looking at the numbers, have you, instead of comparing grade 3 this year to grade 3 last year, do you ever compare grade 4 this year to grade 3 this year? So you're doing the cohort and look for improvement by cohort instead of by grades.
So that's been a major topic of discussion, both between Carrie and myself, and also at the Minnesota Assessment Group, which is district assessment people from all over the state. And we've been cautioned about that cohort to cohort tracking through our system because essentially the MCA wipes the slate clean every year. My third grade standards are not the same as my fourth grade standards, and the test is testing their proficiency on that grade level standard. So I have that cohort data, but we've been cautioned about using it in that way because you get a new set of standards every year. So
Okay, but I'm looking, if you say, oh, there was a drop in 3.8%,
mhm.
but if you actually looked at it each as cohorts, you might have found that each cohort improved a little bit, right?
And we could, and I'm happy to bring that to you when I do the World's Best Workforce presentation so we can take a look at that. When I looked at it, I actually did a pretty extensive study of that prior to COVID. And there wasn't anything super meaningful in it. And then this topic came up quite repeatedly in the Minnesota Assessment Group about how you use MCA data publicly and counsel people on it. And that grade level comparison year to as the cohort moves is we just have to be cautious about that because it's not like a star or a map test where it's adaptive, truly adaptive. It is the grade level standards for that particular grade level only.
Okay. All right, my second question for you, Hope, is about, well, first, what is our percentage of free and reduced price lunch across the district?
I want to say it's about 30 to 32. I've seen two different, it's 30-ish, 30-ish. Okay, we'll go 31 in the middle. There we go.
I-
Today, right now, at this moment.
So you reported on how our grade 8 science score was the 8th highest in proficiency in the state. But I would think another way of looking at it is to say, we're going to group the different districts by categories of, these people have 10 to 20% free and reduced price lunch, and these have 20 to 30%, and these are 30 to 40%. And where do we fall then if we're actually comparing ourselves with sort of similarly situated districts?
Yep. And so there, you'll see the Star Tribune, and I can't remember, Matt, I don't think I've seen it this year, where they'll do what's called a challenge demographic comparison, where they are looking for districts that share like demographic profiles. And that's where they come up with the beating the odds schools. Like you have a certain demographic profile, yet you are outperforming other districts with that demographic profile. I can certainly do that. We have done it before at a school level where we came up with peer schools. I don't know where Carlton helped us with this. He came up with demographic peers that we compared ourselves to pre-COVID. We would need to reboot that whole process to identify our peer districts. We are in sort of, at least we used to be in a little bit of a sweet spot where they're actually like Greenville Park, its demographic profile, there were not a lot of easily identified peer schools just because of the way they're to have that level of EL kids often had a much higher FRP population than GVP actually did. So it's a little bit complicated. We could certainly reboot that with a Carlton term project to help us identify peer schools again. It probably is time to do that again. Now, the further out we move from COVID. But I also, in that data file that's public where I can do this ranking, you can do the ranking by any demographic group as well. So we could put that together where we're limiting it to districts with 31% FRP and what do we look like compared to them. It's just that there's other variables that play into that. It's not just your FRP, it's how many EL you have, how many special education you have. And so that's why that challenge demographic that the Star Tribune does is we let them do the work and then we see where we play out, because they put all those variables together with statistical tools that we don't have at our disposal, rather than just a singular variable.
Well, I'm not looking to ask you to do a lot more work. I'm just looking for more ways to brag about the school district.
No, and I appreciate that.
I think you raise an interesting point that one of the things that when Hope and I meet twice a month, we often slice data a different way. And it's not because, I mean, I appreciate the desire to find the bright spots. We're there too, but what we try to look at this information for is, what does it tell us about the instruction in our system? Where are the places where we have success? Who are other places that we can look to? What are other places that we can look to see? Are there other places that we can gain some good insight or ideas from? And then really trying to come to what we would consider, as close to the truth, if you will, about our comparison. So for example, this is one of 2 presentations that will involve detailed levels of student data. The next one will be the world's best workforce report. And so we can spend a lot of time, because data is interesting. Not all data is productive. So the fact is, we are trying to find what are the kernels of truth that help us improve our system. So for example, one of the things you'll see, I'm sure, at the world's best workforce, because I've asked Hope to use it, is what happens when we look at the ACT scores and we isolate it only for schools that test 100 students or more. That data looks very different for us than if we compare ourselves to districts testing 10 students or more. So one of the things we are blessed with data, but we want to create wisdom from that data. And so I appreciate the questions that are being asked tonight, because they're similar to the questions that we are asking. What is it? What's the piece of information that can tell us how we're doing? You've identified 11 benchmarks in this district that are metrics that we think of as success. A couple of those are MCA data. But what wisdom can we gain from the slicing and the dicing of the data? There are things that are interesting, and we could spend all day with that because that's kind of fun. But what becomes productive? And that question isn't always the same year to year or at certain other points. And I think the question, I do think it's time to look at what are the other districts that the board would like. I think that's a governance question. What are the other districts or school sizes, or, at the school level, district level, would you like us to compare to? Because there's things about our demographic peers. Then there's also things about who are the districts, what are the districts that we would like to consider ourselves to be part of. Those are different questions, right? So, sometimes you look at an athletic conference because you're similarly sized communities, right? Sometimes you look at school districts that are more of what you think of yourself as from an academic prowess perspective, if that makes sense. And that governance question, what are the districts that you would like us to compare to? Carlton helped us the last time, and I agree, it is time to take a look again. We do look at the Big 9 conference regularly, because there are communities that are similar to us in lots of ways, geographically and a lot of things, but is that the right group for us to compare to? Because this is where we want to gain the wisdom from the data and have it be more than just information.
Thank you.
Any more
Can I
questions?
ask Hope, can I ask Carrie my questions now? So Carrie, your turn. And yours are easier. First, I had a question on,
Thank you.
on one of your slides, the impact on engagement slide, not chronically absent versus chronically absent.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just the numbers that you had in your, I'm trying to find the slide right now. Where you had you were listing 46.74% of the not chronically absent students were had the MCA. I just wanted to understand that top part, because it seemed like we had just been given higher MCA scores than you reported, and then all of the ones that you reported were below 50% proficiency.
there is an updated slide. I don't know if you're looking at the updated
Oh,
slide.
maybe I'm looking at the
Yeah, that was a
old
good,
one.
yep, I think that's the old one. Yeah, Hope and Matt and I were talking about that. And I went back, this is literally a screen grab from one of our data integration visualization platforms. And what I'm I don't know if we can project the slide that is, yeah, that is current. And it is probably, there it
that's
is. Yeah, more what you would expect.
Oh, yeah. So I
Mhm.
was looking at mine on here
Yeah.
and not down there.
Yep.
So thank you for
Mhm.
clarifying that. Okay.
Mhm.
That's great. And I just wanted to say, I think it's great that you're involving all the parents in the absenteeism because I think they are the key to it because they're the ones that are making the kids come to school. And I also have a question though, on your story about the the child that just doesn't want to go to school. I'm wondering if that ever is like a teacher-student fit issue, if something like that happens and there's a student that never wants to come to school because there's something at school that isn't working out for them. What happens in that situation?
Right. And that is the work of our attendance teams in the buildings, is they get to know those families and those students' attendance patterns quite well. And one of the things that we do is we run our students through a supportive problem-solving team process where we look at the variables that can be contributing to their challenge and go after each of those separately. And that is a question that is asked because we want comfort at school, comfort and safety and learning to be paramount. So there are a variety of things that our teams will consider when they are looking at a pattern of attendance for a student. And that is
Thank you.
one.
Did you have a question, Jenny?
Thank you, Claudia. And thank you both. But before I ask your questions, I just want to, if I could ask Dr. Hillman a question to tail off of the information you just gave us. I'm going to muddy the waters a little bit and ask if we know if other districts are also comparing to the entire state, every district that tests 10 or more students, or if they're doing something new or different, or if the majority of all of them just take statewide comparison.
Yeah, I mean, either Hope and I can let's have Hope answer because she is so plugged in with the Minnesota Assessment Group that is across the state. My hunch is that there are probably as many ways of looking at this as there are districts.
I'm actually surprised at how many people don't know that that file exists, right? There is a public file on the MDE data analytics site that allows you to look at every district and school. So whether other districts are actually doing that or not, I know I've worked with other district assessment people who didn't know it existed and wanted to start including that. But we use it every year simply for that context. But I feel pretty confident that not everyone knows that file is out there. So, yeah.
And I think to your question, I think, there's 331 or so Minnesota school districts. And I think there's a variety of different ways that people look at it. I think there are people who use the data like we do in trying to gain wisdom. I think that there are people who frankly don't even really get too much into comparing themselves elsewhere. There are some school districts that have really gone the other way on the MCA, that their just systems belief is that there's too much emphasis placed on that particular assessment, and so they have gone different routes of how they try to describe what success is. There are districts who probably even do a little bit more comparison than we do. I feel confident in saying we are one of the districts that does more analysis, and despite the flaws of the MCA, it is our state test, right? It is the test that that we use to assess Minnesota state standards. And so it is a systems test that was a little bit muddied with some of the changes that we've seen in legislation where people want to count it as a student test, and it is an individual student proficiency or not. It was originally intended for something different. I would say there's a number of different ways that people look at this. We view it as a valuable piece of information about our system. One piece of information, to be very clear, and then as you see with things like the World's Best Workforce Report and other data that we bring you, we try to bring all of those things together, again, to create some meaning. So there's no one way. I think we do use it more than most.
And I think, Jenny, the reason why I started using that district was actually from parent feedback about a particular proficiency rate in a particular grade level. And it wasn't until till we learned that that file exists that we could say, well, wait a minute, there's not hundreds of districts getting 99% proficiency in third grade, right? It allowed us to see the scope of proficiency rates across the state. And so to me, I can no longer look at proficiency without the state context because it provides the whole picture. So that's why we stay with it every year.
Great, thank you. And then also on our new column, percent of students testing, what, can you explain some of the reasons why a student would not be testing? Is it all because, they're absent that day?
Sometimes it's absence. We do have parents who just choose to not have their students take the MCA. And for a variety of reasons, sometimes they believe that it's not an appropriate measure of their particular students' ability to do that grade level work. And some, they don't have to put a reason. Most will fill out the form like we ask them to, but which asks for a reason, but they don't always put a reason. But I would say absence is far less of a reason because we tend to make up the tests for kids who are absent, but more it's a parental choice.
Okay, thank you. And then I'll move on to the attendance presentation. So I noticed on the first page of the presentation, you have an area that it says addresses current support gap under the layered practices. Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, thanks. So what we are always looking at when we're looking at our later practices is as granular a continuum of support as we can get. There are the universal things that we do to make a climate of safety and a good match for all students, clarity in attendance policies, supportive academic environments so students come to school. That's what everybody gets. Student who's showing some signs of not being able to get there consistently, we layer on another practice. This attendance liaison allows us to get to an intensity that we haven't had. Our social workers, our school counselors, our behavior coaches, these are people who are excellent in their work, but they're not leaving the building during the day to go do home visits. And so we know that there's a cohort of students that needs something that's a little bit more intense than what we've been able to achieve with our current staff. So that's that gap that we noticed is we just want to get that as granular as possible because every student responds at a different level.
And then also on that same page, you have parent, that you received feedback from parent focus groups. Can you also explain what those are?
Yeah, so with our current family engagement navigators and our cultural liaison, 2 springs ago, Hope and I invited them to, in each of the elementary buildings, invited them to a dinner where we walked through data. We wanted to say, like, this is their data, that we see, we invited them and into a conversation with their family engagement navigator and the cultural liaison there to say, here's what we're looking at. Help us help out, help us to identify what's needed. And we walked away from that and we knew that families were looking for collective support from one another, support from us. It's hard to hear data when you feel like you don't have control over changing it. And so we wanted to make sure that we were giving them resources too.
Thank you.
Very good. Anyone else? Okay, Jeff?
Thanks for your report. I guess, over the years, maybe the district demographics changes. I'm sure it does a lot, but just to give you kind of more of a historical perspective, growing up here and graduating from here, you have a very academic town from the basis that, the 2 major employers, the 2 of them are the 2 colleges and then the school district. So there's always been a priority on education. I can just tell you from growing up here, when you're looking around and it's kind of like in high school is like, well, we can grade on a percentage or on a curve, and you look around and you just realize who's in the room, and it's like professor's kid had, and it was kind of cool. We all got together, great. And I get back to the point that we always kind of make. I do like the idea of comparison to 5 other school districts or whatever else, but to really get back to the thing we talk about a lot and have in the past is cutting edge and bleeding edge. Cutting edge. And a lot of these bigger districts, I mean, you go to them or whatever, or smaller or whatever, what are you doing that works? I mean, what can you do that's learning? And you look at all those different cohorts. And I think, I mean, I have an idea of 5 districts and things that we kind of compare to, but I think you got to kind of piecemeal that together and just kind of see, because I think, would you say, I mean, what is our demographic for general students? I'm sure, and from going back on the college thing, that's why I've kind of always seen and had a great expectation of what Northfield can be and should be as far as academics. And it should be, I mean, I think one of the best in the state, period, but I'm a little bit biased. So, I mean, with that being said, not to put you on the spot for, other districts we compare ourselves to, but is there a couple of maybe examples of districts that you think that do maybe our size or not, that do, some real things well that we could kind of learn from?
You did put me on the spot. Matt and I were looking at the ranking the other day. I- When we look to say, okay, how did Wayzata do? How did Edina do? But there is a point this year where we're like, ooh, we were higher than Edina. And, so I think the group that Carlton put together for us had some surprises, but had some towns that we expected to be compared to. So this one, I think it makes more sense, especially like we are not the Northfield that we were, right? We now have 24% of our student population is student of color. That just have seen a shift, right, in our demographics. That's okay, right? It makes us a richer place and a richer school district. So I think the way to go at it is to find peers that are demographically similar using multiple variables. And that I think would be a Carlton term project. So I don't really want to.
Oh, so really the answer to that, I mean, to put you on the spot, but I mean, the demographics and the culture is changing.
Mhm.
We kind of always go back to the golden crescent of, the Wayzatas, Edina,
Yeah.
and Minnetonka. And yeah, they're big school districts. I mean, we're smaller districts. So how is our, what you're saying is our demographic is changing, and how can we do the best with the demographic we have? So.
And really, what Matt and I've talked about a lot is like, really what we want is 80% of our kids meeting proficiency on any assessment that they take, from the classroom level assessment all the way up. Not because we don't want 100%, obviously we do, but we know that our system can support helping 20% versus 40%. So.
And we did a little analysis just on, I think we were looking at the ACT the other day, the ACT results. And I want to be really clear that, again, 80% is congruent with our aspirational goal of preparing every child for lifelong success. If we hit 80% in those ACT assessments, any one of them, we would have been number 1 in the state number 1 in the state, and there was a couple of tests where 1 or 2 districts would have been higher than us. So you hit 80% proficiency on any result in any of these things, you are in the top 5. It's very easy to say that. But I think I appreciate you bringing that up, because I think that's one of the other things that's challenging when we focus solely on the numerical part, right? Which we do, because we don't shy away from it. But one of the things you heard me say a number of times, and I believe with all of my heart, 30 years of working with all sorts of kids. If I go back to student teaching, 31 years, YMCA experience in the Bronx, 33 years total of working with kids. And the whole point about that aspirational piece of every student being prepared for lifelong success, when we talk about the data we're talking about today, the one thing that we miss is that not every student achieves those grade level standards at the same time or in the same way. So we look at this data because we think it's an important systems check. But even if we got to, when we get to, not if, when we get to 80% proficient on all of these metrics on a continuous basis, which we will be outperforming most of the places in the state, and it leaves room to not make kids or families feel like they are lesser than because they didn't achieve something in this predetermined time frame. Because who cares if a kid, gets the fourth grade standard, 2 months after four? They got it, right? I mean, and we use these time frames as an important part, but not every child is going to achieve it at the same time or the same rate. And think about people you went to school with. And you all can give me at least one example of that. So we focus on this. We don't shy away from the grade level standard data because it's important. But we also have to recognize it in the larger context, Jeff. And I think that's a really great point that not every kid gets there at the same time or at the same rate. And if we got to 80% on that way to every student, we'd be crushing it, right? Or we will be crushing is the way we should say it.
Anyone else? More comments, questions? I have an easy question for you, Carrie. Also an acronym TNTP. Is it Teachers Mentoring New Teachers?
Oh,
That's hope.
TNTP?
Yes.
It's actually just called TNTP now, but what it used to be called was the New Teacher Project. But they've dropped that, and now it's just TNTP. And that is,
It's New Teacher Project.
that was what it was called. The acronym, it used to be an acronym. Now their true name is TNTP. And that is the group we are partnering it with, funded through the Cerisi grant that we were awarded last year.
And then remind me how long the pilot length is, the attendance?
Years.
3 years. Okay. Is it 3 calendar years or academic years?
3 academic years.
Thank you.
I have one more thing.
Okay, yep, that's all I have.
So one of the things that Carrie brought up in her presentation was about adjusting the definition or making the definition of tardiness at the elementary level more consistent. So you know that when you adopt policies, almost always the procedures that go with those policies are what the administrators do to enact the policy on a day-to-day basis. The attendance piece has something in there talking about that procedures should be approved by the board. And so I just want you to know that we think as we've looked into this and being part of the pilot, we don't think that our normal process for adjusting things makes sense here. When we uncover something, which is the whole point of the pilot, we feel we should adjust. So we, of course, given lead time, and elementary tardies are different, obviously, but I want you to know that this report is likely going to spawn you seeing an updated version of attendance procedures. Normally, we would never do that mid-year, but we think that it's inappropriate that we don't do it mid-year. And so as we're looking at that, we may take a look at a couple of other definitions in those procedures for attendance just to clean up. Something that they talked about with attendance that's really important is that we've done a deep dive into this attendance issue for a couple of years now. We feel we're ahead of many other districts in really cleaning some of these things up. But the first piece is how do you record the absences? And there's no, in many districts, there's no 2 elementary buildings that record absences in exactly the same way. So I want you to expect that we're going to take the unusual step of bringing an updated attendance procedures document to you sometime likely before the end of the calendar year.
All right, thank you so much. Okay, next we have special services and FTE requests. Director of Special Services, Sarah Pratt, will be requesting a 1.0 FTE additional licensed special education resource teacher at Spring Creek Elementary with an anticipated hire date of November 1, 2024. All right, Sarah, would you like to update us?
Yes, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. And I am here to request your consideration of an increase of a 1.0 FTE for Spring Creek Elementary specifically. We do our very best when we make our projections in the spring, and we usually accommodate for a change of a few students here and there. We had a little bit of an unprecedented increase that we did not account for this school year. Between August 1st and now, we've had 16 students enroll at Spring Creek Elementary with IEPs or individual education programs. 13 of those students have resource level services or higher, which is in Northfield and in our region equivalent to a full caseload. And I would just say that we always try to look at creative ways to meet those needs by shifting staff as we can. But as you can see in the information that I shared as well, we have increased our child count by at least 60 students in the last few years, and we have kept our increase of FTE to a minimum given those numbers of increase. And so we really didn't have a lot of flexibility in our current staffing to shift staff to cover that increased need at Spring Creek. Along with just the numbers came a pretty significant increase in the level of need as well with some of the students that enrolled. We have some pretty significant safety concerns with social, emotional, behavioral needs. We have students who spend a significant portion of their day requiring 2 or more staff to respond to their needs. And so with all of that, I am asking for an increase in a licensed staff. With a total cost, including the special ed revenue reimbursed, the total cost with an anticipated hire date would be $27,500, just over that. So,
Okay, board members, any questions or comments? Okay, Jenny?
Thanks. I just have a question, just sort of thinking about the future.
mhm.
We're all 16 kindergarten level students?
No,
Mixture of?
a
different
mixture,
grades?
yes. Yeah.
Thanks.
Anyone? Corey?
Couple questions for you, Sarah. Thanks for being here.
Yes.
What's the hiring pool look like right now for a position like this?
Challenging. This time of year, there's always a hope that we have mid-year graduates in some of our teacher preparation programs, or staff who've moved in. I know we have hired a few educational assistants this year who could meet the criteria for a provisional license or a tiered license through the state of Minnesota who've had experience working with students in an educational setting, in an instructional manner. So we might have an internal pool, but we would really work hard to recruit and reach out to all of our resources.
Given the increase over the last 3 years, it clearly ebbs and flows, but it's been ebbing, I guess, or flowing, whichever way.
Both.
Would you anticipate that this would be just a 1-year hire, or is this something you'd look to add long-term for next fiscal year? Is it too early to say that we'd want to have this this position stick around?
I would think if we look at projections every spring, every winter and spring. So right after winter break, we start looking at our numbers and our projections. We look at graduation numbers, numbers of students who are graduating, projected preschool and kids coming into kindergarten. And so I think given our current landscape and given the steady rise in numbers over the past several years and our ability to have absorbed that with our current numbers, I would look at this being a little bit more long-term, but depending on what those projections look like, we certainly wouldn't pad our numbers, so to speak, in the spring if we don't need that FTE.
Okay. And then finally, I know when we have these requests mid-year, there's usually a need, as you've demonstrated tonight. Would it be beneficial to move this up to approval tonight? But given the talent pool, does it matter on your end if the hiring date's November 1 versus October, 25th or whatever that Monday is?
I don't know that we'd get there as quickly as November 1st. I think that's pretty idealistic, but if you are willing to consider it, it would very much be appreciated. We could get it posted and start recruiting sooner. But I certainly understand the need for the process to take longer if need be.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Anyone else? Question? Okay. So do we need to take a vote on moving it to the?
Yeah, so just to be clear, if a board member wanted to move this to an item for individual action, you would need to make a motion to move this item from the discussion reports to an item for individual action. So that's one way you can do it. Another way would be you could allow us to post an anticipated posting, or then at the next meeting, you formally approve it. We've done it a couple of different ways over the years. But if you want to move it to be part of tonight's items for individual action, you would need to make a motion, have a second, and obviously take a vote to move it to items for individual action from discussions and reports.
Sorry?
I'd be happy to make that motion. So I would like to make a motion to move item 6B, special services FTE request, to an item for action tonight for a vote.
Okay, is there a second? Okay, Precha. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, then we will move that request to items for individual action later tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. And I'm sorry, I cut off discussion there. Were there any other questions, comments? Okay, very good. Item C is the superintendent's State of the District overview. Superintendent Hillman will present an overview of the district's strategic plan implementation, progress towards its benchmarks in areas of focus.
Well, good evening. It's fun to be at the podium here for a change, and I'm happy to always share with you the State of the District overview. We've been doing the State of the District presentation for, I'm estimating, more than 2 decades in Northfield. The State of the District presentation is typically aligned with a Chamber of Commerce luncheon. So the Chamber of Commerce has sponsors, many members come each year. Normally, we would have had the State of the District in kind of mid-September, late September, but this year, the Chamber asked us to do the State of the District back in August. And so we use this same core presentation for a number of other things. We've provided similar presentation for Rotary. Just a week ago, Hope Langston and Val Murdersdorf provided the presentation for the Northfield Interfaith Association. So we use this slide deck, if you will, for a number of groups in the community who want to hear about how the district is doing. And so it's also been standard practice typically at this board meeting to share with you the state of the district. This year was a little bit different because so much of the presentation was about the bond referendum. And I'm not going to present about the bond referendum for you here this evening. I see the relief on many people's faces that I'm not going to do that. But I am going to provide the first couple of slides from the presentation, and then I'm going to show you our benchmarks that are on the website. That's something else that we're trying to embed within this State of the District presentation each year, is to talk about the 11 benchmarks that you've identified. And so we'll do so as part of this presentation. I love this photo. This is Junior Martinez from Northfield High School, just nailing an Elvis Presley song last year at the Rock and Roll Revival. And if you think about all of the things that make Northfield, I think Rock and Roll Revival is one of those signature pieces that we have. And so I always look through photos and what's the story why you want to tell for the year. And I just love this photo. I think it demonstrates the joy that our students have in their learning. And so it really is one of the ways that I frame this presentation. So when you are sick of seeing this slide, we are halfway there. And you have heard all of the presentations for quite some time start with this document. Every one of your board packets, if you've noticed, starts with this document. And it's because this is the main work of the board, setting the direction for the district. And when we use our vision of preparing every student for lifelong success by developing critical thinkers who are curious and ready to engage in our society, we mean it. And I've now had the chance to provide members of our community in easily dozens of settings because I've been blessed with the opportunity to present in a number of different places. And when I share this vision with people, regardless of their political perspective, regardless of their religious affiliation, regardless of how they feel about different issues, people can get around this. People say to us that, yes, if we were to achieve this vision, that the aspirational nature of it, if kids graduate from Northfield High School prepared for lifelong success by being critical thinkers who are curious and ready to engage in our society, people say that would be a good thing. So I think we often don't hear about that agreement that people have. This is something that people agree on. They agree that this is a worthy vision. And when we look at the strategic commitments, these are the lenses that we use to make decisions in the school district. And it's something that you all thought, and previous boards have thought a lot about. What are the values that we have in the system? And we talk with people about these regularly. And finally, those benchmarks in the middle, it was a step forward. If you remember, these benchmarks were originally aligned with the Northfield Promise Collective Impact benchmarks. Not completely exactly, but very close. And Northfield Promise is a group of, I believe, over 30 organizations that had come together to say, how do we make sure all of our resources in our community that are being used for kids are getting the maximum benefit? So when we adopted this strategic plan in 2022, one of the things we did was we aligned the benchmarks with Northfield Promise, not exactly the same, but very close. And so again, that whole piece of that our entire community is involved in educating our children. So when I think about the state of the district and some highlights from the year, we start with academics, right? Learner outcomes is one of our strategic commitments, and people expect that we have students who learn things when they come to school. And so a few items here, I love this photo too. That photo is from last year's FFA banquet. And in the first year of ag returning to Northfield High School after a 30+ year absence, 45 students were enrolled to participate in the FFA. Nearly cut. The program was nearly cut. And not only did we bring back ag education to Northfield High School, we also brought FFA back, and 45 students are engaged in that in year one. And it's only going to grow from here. It's just, we really believe that we found the sweet spot of what we needed to do to shake up our career and technical education programs to meet the needs of more students and to bring more students into that fold. And TJ Austin is just an amazing advisor for FFA and a great ag teacher. I've had the chance to watch him teach a number of times. Just lightning in a bottle is how people have described him, and it's an understatement. So we're so proud of all that ag brings back, not just the content, but the connection with the community, the crossover that it has with sophisticated laboratory sciences, all of the things that we see from ag. It's really been a great decision for us as we moved forward. You have heard a number of times about our mathematics curriculum adoption. This is a really big thing, and I've had a chance to observe many teachers already using the new curriculum and talking with people about it. And what I would say is that there are a lot of people who are feeling like they are new teachers again. And I've had a number of conversations with people, especially elementary teachers in the last month or so, about the power of being a beginner. Think about when you are a beginner at something, right? Now, this is hard for some of our veteran teachers who are very skilled at their craft. And so they've lost a little bit of that efficacy because they knew how to teach the old curriculum, right? And now they are learning that. We talk about how if we really want to say that everyone should be a lifelong learner, educators need to go first. We need to model that we are lifelong learners. And our elementary teachers this year are definitely modeling that, right? With the new mathematics curriculum adoption, and then, of course, 119 more pre-K through another 119 teachers. There's mostly pre-K through 5. There are some 6th through 12th grade teachers who are taking the READ training, but that science of reading also is something that we're very proud of having been ahead of the curve, and we're continuing to see the impact, as Hope said, in some of those subtests on the assessments that we use more regularly than things like the MCA. We're seeing some really meaningful progress. We've also seen an increase in the number of students who take advanced placement course tests. You can take an AP test, or excuse me, an AP class, but not take the test. And we have seen more students taking the AP test. Now, I'm not going to get into the rest of the details about that other than the fact that more students are seeing themselves on that pathway to where they can earn some college credit through this program at our high school. And of course, if you can earn that college credit at our high school, that reduces the financial burden that you have when you go off to a 2-year school, a 4-year school, or whatever your pathway is when you leave. So having students take more advanced placement courses, if they take the test and they secure a score that is high enough for the institution that they're going to attend, and the institution takes it, that can help reduce the financial burden of college. But even more importantly, you heard Hope talk about high quality instructional materials. And one of the things that we know about advanced placement coursework is that it is rigorous course materials. We even have one course, World History, where we have so many students taking the advanced placement version of that, that we're, nearly, I understand we're over almost in the hundreds of students range who are taking that advanced placement world history course. So we think it's about reducing those barriers, about kids having access to that higher level, more rigorous curriculum, and then, of course, reducing their financial barrier as they go off to college. You heard about the community school, the report that you have tonight in front of you is about the community schools, and we are proud to have shared with you already and share with the community that Northfield is one of 4 school districts in the country, 4 school districts in the country to be identified by the Council of Chief State School Officers. That's an acronym that I have to make sure I hit every time. But that is essentially the professional organization of all of the commissioners of education, state commissioners of education across the country. And so the CCSSO identified Northfield as one of 4 districts in the nation for our judicious use of ESSER funding. Now, that was, remember, COVID relief funding. And so we were able to use that funding and braid it with other ongoing funding streams to expand community school from just Greenvale Park to all 3 elementary schools. And we have so far avoided the fiscal cliff that happened with so many districts and their COVID relief funds. We think this is something to be celebrated. It's a very clear articulation of our commitment to learner outcomes and to stewardship. We didn't think it was right to say, let's hire a bunch of positions that we know we're going to have to cut 2 years from now. We don't think that's good stewardship. But investing it in things like science of reading training and investing it in things like the community school model that we know has been successful and that we were able to identify other ongoing funding streams to keep that going, we think is a great success story. Employees in a school district are important. These are the people that care for our children. They're the people who teach our children to read. They're the people that maintain our grounds and make sure that our schools are clean and safe. And we really take our employees' experience seriously. Of course, our focus is on outcomes for students, but the outcomes for students, shockingly, depend on the actions of the adults around them. And if the adults around them feel like they work for a place that cares about them, that is interested in their professional expertise, that supports them in their times of need, and they feel like in a moment of clarity, not every day, it's still a workplace, right? Not every day is joyous, but at that moment of clarity, when you can step back and say, yeah, people do care what I think. People do want me to be successful. They are invested in me. That's what we want people to say on those times of clarity when it's not, intense and they're just thinking about their employer. This is a good place to work. So we've been measuring our employee experience for several years. And last year's employee experience result, we showed improvement in 19 of 20 indicators. And we think that is really something that we should be proud of. There's more work to do. But when you see year-over-year improvement, that's how we continue. Our continuous improvement model works. It's not about, I love baseball analogies. It's not about hitting a grand slam, right? It's about a series of singles that result in runs being scored, and that's what we're after. We also saw a 0.10 improvement on 7 of those indicators. And if you think about it on a 5-point scale, an improvement of 0.1 is pretty substantial. So we're really pleased to have seen the fruit of our work paying off there. Parent satisfaction obviously is something else that we care very much about. We want parents to feel satisfied with their children's educational experience. And last year's data showed that we improved in 11 of those 15 indicators, and a 12th one remained exactly the same as the year before. So again, we're taking what we heard from parents, we're putting it into action as we can within reason, and we've seen last year we saw year-over-year improvement on 11 of 15 indicators. We think it's important to continue to elevate the voice of demographic segments of our communities who have traditionally been marginalized in a number of settings. And so we have really worked hard to make sure that we are listening to our families, especially those families who, again, belong to traditionally marginalized demographic groups in society. So the photo that you see is from the inaugural Northfield Juneteenth celebration. And so the idea of having a celebration of Black culture came from our Black Parent Advisory Committee. And we counted, I think, we counted about 77, 78 people who were there. We had a nice meal beforehand, again, thanks to the generosity of Nuger and of Northfield Promise. We were able to fund this. And it was such a great experience, a great collective community experience. And so we did the most Northfield thing ever. We had a lecture, and Dr. Yolanda Williams from the University of Minnesota presented on specifically about the influence of Black music on the American music scene. It was really something that people valued hearing, and this is the kind of place that schools can be. We can use our convening power. We can bring people together to learn about each other and about each other's cultures. And we think that this was a real success, and we look forward to not only doing this again next year, but also expanding this to some other areas where we can be that central place for our community to come together, to learn about each other, and make Northfield even better than what it is today. You got to have money to do this stuff, right? You got to have money, and it has to be predictable. You all made some difficult choices a couple of years ago because we know that acting early in we know that we have financial issues coming down the line. It's tough in the moment, but it helps us in the longer term. And so I point out here that we have had back to back, and then hopefully maybe in a couple months you'll hear another back where we've had no audit findings. And that's a testament to this woman right here. Val Mersdorf is a genius, and she is fantastic at what she does, because people can have confidence in this community that we know where the money is, that it's allocated appropriately, and that the appropriate controls are in place to make sure that it's being used according to all the rules and the regulations that we have. And so this is the kind of thing that should inspire confidence in our community. We also like to point out where we spend our money. So these next two slides are from previous audit reports. This is from last year. So this particular slide looks at cost per student for administration. And in that light blue line, you see the state average for similarly sized school districts. In the yellow bar, you see the state average. And then to the left, you see Northfield's average. And the 2023 average is obviously less cost per administration per student than both similarly sized districts and the state average. And then the next slide, you see, and another important piece, that we spend more on average per student for direct instruction, regular instruction, than both similarly sized school districts and the state average. So when we talk about where we putting our money that aligns with the strategic plan, this tells the story, right? We spend less on administration per student than similarly sized districts or the state, and we spend more on regular instruction than similarly sized districts and the state. And our administrative team will be the first to tell you that, yes, Matt, we know that we spend less on administration per student because we are lean. And the only reason we can pull that off is because we have all-stars in those chairs and in those departments. If we didn't have all-stars, we could not pull this off. But people get a good value for their money so that we can put those dollars directly into the classroom. And I do love this slide. Val hates it when I show this slide, but this is from one of the tabling events that we did downtown this summer. And this slide means a lot to me because I think a lot of times you think of finance and we think about the numbers and the buckets of money and the rules. But at the end of the day, something that I think we do fairly well is that we see children in that data. We see children's faces as part of our financial outlook because it is the students who the finances support. And we've been blessed by a very supportive community who has allowed us to do some of these things that we think and know are good for kids. So I love this photo because it shows our finance director leaning into talking to small children because she gets that it's about kids. And the numbers are important, the data is important, but it is about serving these students. And we always keep that in mind. I love this slide about some of our alumni. So upper left, going left to right, we see Peter Lindell, and he is a star of the Disney Plus series Descendants. So loved seeing Peter in Rock and Roll Revival and some other shows here in Northfield. Alice Zhang is the second one there. She was just identified as one of the top undergraduate researchers in the country in computer science. We see Steve Grove, who is now the publisher of the Star Tribune. We see Stephanie Graff, formerly Stephanie Groutman. Her dad, Tom, was the longtime activities director here. She's the deputy commissioner for the Minnesota Department of Education. The lower left corner, you see Ben Wong. And I can remember watching Ben Wong in productions at Northfield High School since he was in 9th grade, and he will be your next Karate Kid. So when they reboot the Karate Kid series coming up, Ben Wong will be the actor playing the Karate Kid. Just like yesterday, I saw him playing the leading player in the show Pippin on the Northfield High School stage. Just some amazing things. Mark Auger, I put in here as a representative of all of the people who went to Northfield High School who returned to teacher. I've been rounding. This rounding tool is something where we meet individually with staff members, and I'm rounding with 42 new staff members. I'm almost there. And several of them are Northfield High School graduates. They want to come back here to teach, like Mark Auger did, because they know it's a supportive community and they want to give back. And Mark is holding an Envirothon trophy there, which I was corrected. We've had Envirothon before, but Mark helped reboot it a couple of years ago. In their first year, they went back to the state tournament. Next, you see Tracy Clausen and Jody Green. Tracy is our grounds coordinator. They spoke at the Memorial Day event at St. Olaf College this past May. Tracy was one of the local chairs of that event, and Jody Green is a former undersecretary, I think I've got this right, undersecretary for the U.S. Navy. And so we've had our alumni who have also made their contributions through military service. And you can't have a Northfield High School alumni grid without former Governor Al Quie. And so Al Quie, a Northfield High School graduate as well. I think it's important for us to track where our alumni are going because it can tell the story of the school district in a different way. So what's next? We continue to work on all of the things that you have heard about, science of reading instruction, right? Mathematics curriculum updates, the curriculum and instructional review cycle, making sure that we are trying to manage our finances in declining enrollment like so many school districts across the country because people are just having fewer babies, and in our community it's tougher to get housing. We're also looking at what's next in terms of things like how does artificial intelligence play a role in public education? We're starting that work. Our administrators had an opportunity to engage in a full day of professional development or a half day of professional development this past June. This year, we're looking ahead. I'm looking ahead. What's the next? We haven't put a lot of pressure on people with this yet, but we're seeing what some of those other bleeding edge districts are doing right now in the effort of being cutting edge, letting some others learn about it. So that's, I think, something that's going to be really important as we move down the line. I've charged our district level departments to look at how can they use artificial intelligence in the management of their day-to-day work within the school district. And we've got some pretty good examples of some things that we're seeing. So how can we leverage that to make our operations more efficient? How can we prepare students for their future and not our past by helping students understand what is the appropriate way to use artificial intelligence? What are ways that are inappropriate to use artificial intelligence? If I do, how do I cite it? Things like that. So these are some of the kinds of things that are coming down the line. And then, of course, did you know that we're having a bond referendum in November? And so that's another big thing that we've talked about with the state of the district address. And then finally, we are just so lucky in so many ways. We have challenges like lots of places, but we have a fantastic, in fact, Claudia talked about the blanket ceremony at the beginning, and there in the second row left hand side, that is an image of one of the first blanket ceremonies that we had last spring, honoring our Indigenous friends and neighbors and the culture that helps make us such a rich nation. And so just some of these things, that picture of the small child who is painting on the bus, I had to chuckle because the bus company said, "Oh, we hope the painting will come off." They had that. It did. I've been assured that they did. But what we get a chance to see in this district every day, from the babies that I get to hold, which are pretty awesome, right, to a picture of Sarah Swan McDonald and Patricia Owusu from last year when Patricia won a city award for leadership. Everything in between, it is a privilege to get to do this work. We joke about it, but it is a special place, and for the flaws and the challenge that we have, when you step back, we are pretty lucky in so many ways. So that is the state of the district presentation for this year. And again, a little bit different than in the past. I do want to just briefly show you something as well. So something we talk about with our benchmarks is that I want just the board to know, and I know you know this already, but I want to make sure people who are watching know that on our strategic plan page, where we have an opportunity to download our strategic plan, we make all of the vision and strategic commitments written in text so that it can be read by a screen reader. And then you see this section about benchmarks. And so these are the 11 benchmarks that you have adopted. And each one of these we update as appropriate. So you can see things like if we take you heard tonight about our MCA results. And so you can see that this was recently updated. We can open up that accordion. You can see data that represents our progress on that in a digestible way for people who are looking. It's not a deep dive, but you can see that. You can see things like the social emotional well-being from a recent SSIS survey. We're still waiting for the results from that previous one. You can see things like all students graduating from high school with a plan to reach their full potential. Like this one is a year ago because we literally just got those ACT results from last year the other day. And so those are the things that we're working on in terms of updating. Here's the employee satisfaction that we talked about from the 2023-24 update. You can see that we've updated. Again, some of these things are a year behind. In fact, this one did not update here. So we just updated some of these items here just a little bit earlier today. Let's see where that's at. Yeah, so if you look at this, there's some updated items. For some reason, this did not get updated, but we update these items as they come in regularly. And so you can see those updates on the website. Some things are updated in the spring, some in the summer, some right around this time of the year. So this is the time frame this is the location where you can see the updates that we have for our strategic plan and those benchmarks. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that people have at this time about the state of the district. You've probably heard enough of it, but I'd be happy to answer any questions that people have.
Great, thank you, Matt, and thank you for your leadership and your fingerprints on this whole district, making it a special place. Board members, do you have any questions or comments? Okay, Amy?
I would like to second Claudia's comment on thanking you for your leadership over the last 8 years. And I'm going to ask you a tough question. If you could summarize the state of the district in one word, what would it be?
Have you ever known me to use one word?
Answering the question.
I guess that I would say forward. We just keep moving forward, right? If I could use 2 words, it would be what's next, because that is the mantra that we have about that what we did today. Some people worry about continuous improvement, that we're saying that what you did today isn't good enough, but really what you did today is what you did today. Nothing we can do about it, right? So what are we going to do tomorrow? What's next? What are we going to do tomorrow to make everyone's experience a little bit better? So one word,
You say 'em
almost
quickly
impossible
together.
for me.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Comment or question? Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
And the match show will continue. Little costume change. Okay, so we have our policy committee recommendations, and Dr. Hillman will present the policy committee's recommended updates to policies 207, 509, 512, and 513. This will be an item for individual action at our next board meeting.
So the 4 policies that we have in the packet this evening for first reading, almost all of them were really driven based on legislative changes. So we're working through all of the legislative changes that happened in the 2024 session, and we're bringing those changes forward to you. Something that the policy committee is beginning to do as a result of a session we attended at the Minnesota School Boards Association back to school event in August is we are taking a look at each of the purpose statements. And so what we're trying to do in each of these is when we look at the purpose statement, we're updating any policy, we're trying to make it an explicit connection to the strategic plan. So by way of example, if you open 207 public hearings, you'll see that the policy adjustment there, or the purpose adjustment, began to include something like the Northfield School District Board of Education is committed to people, communications, and partnerships, and recognizes the importance of obtaining public input on matters properly, and goes on from there. So what we're attempting to in each of these purpose statements is, what of the strategic commitments does the policy really shine on, or is there a connection to the vision statement that we want to highlight? So in these 4 policies that you have before you today, it really, the things that we identified for change were the purpose statements. The other changes in each of those policies were a result of legislative changes. And I'd be happy to answer questions about any of them at this time.
Very good. Okay, Rob.
I just want to look at briefly 512. And I would just suggest in the purpose that where it says, you've got school-sponsored activities, you've got publications, and crossed out, that you say school-sponsored media and activities, just because in section 2C, that is the language used, so just to be consistent.
So you're saying, Rob, just to make sure that we don't cross out publications.
Well, I would say school-sponsored media and
Okay.
activities, because you have school-sponsored media and activities in section 2C1, for example.
We can make that change. I think that seems reasonable.
Good, Corey?
I have kind of a 2-part question for policy 509, the enrollment of non-resident students. First question is, how often, if ever, do we hold a lottery?
To my knowledge, we have not ever held a lottery.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And then the second question, I realize there's like a deadline related to a potential lottery, which you just answered, but for cases where like this part of the school year, we have a student who wants to open enroll from outside the district, doesn't have an association with any building, and let's say they want to go to Spring Creek, where we know like 4th and 5th grade are kind of at capacity, and that's their preference. Does the district navigate those students to other schools based on the availability?
Yes.
So I thought, thank you.
And it's very important because when a new student enrolls in the district, an open enrolled student, Once the district assigns them to an elementary building, for all intents and purposes, then it functions as if they lived within that attendance area. So what we do every year is we take a look at where are the grade levels that have the greatest capacity. We do consider class size. There are also things from time to time, if there's a student who has received special education services and that student's program, the specific program that they need is clustered at one of our elementary schools, that obviously becomes the default. But we do look at class size. We do look at a number of those things as we assign. We do take into account sibling preference. So that is something that, maybe one first grade isn't the lowest, but their sibling had already been approved. We consider those kinds of things. But in general, one of the first things that we look at is class size. How can we distribute students? And to be straightforward, we've had some people who've decided not to come as a result of that.
Okay. Jenny?
I just wanted to see or obtain a clarification on 509 item 3C. It says the parent of a student with a disability not yet enrolled in kindergarten. Would that be resident or non-resident? I think you can figure it out from the context if you continue reading, but I think it might be important to include just to state whether it's resident or non-resident student.
I appreciate you bringing that up, but we'll take a look at it about how we can, this was one of the main changes in this policy from legislation that really governs the so what was happening is my understanding of why this changed is that a family may have they thought open enrolled their student into another district for our early childhood program. And then there is a separation between pre-kindergarten and kindergarten. And the open enrollment law actually requires you to open enroll for kindergarten. And so there were people who were frustrated saying, hey, wait a minute, we brought our student to early childhood special education in this district. Why aren't they just I shouldn't have to fill anything else out. And so that's my understanding is that this is the main reason that this segment is. It is about non-resident students who are enrolled in a preschool or early childhood program who then want to matriculate. When we look at it, I think I tend to think that the definition of residency at the top, that lead probably says it, but you're saying that we're inferring it and we should make it explicit.
I would say just if you want to reduce any confusion.
Yep, and to be clear, we didn't write this one. This was somebody else wrote, but we'll take it. So we can make the adjustment too, because I think clarifying that this is about non-resident students is important. So we'll make that change for when we come back the next time.
Okay. Amy?
So I also have a question on policy 509, and I just was wondering if you would speak on if someone has a special education student that they want to open enroll in the district, is at any point can we say we're at capacity with our teachers, or are we open to any open enrollment? And also a corollary to that is if they want to open enroll in our district, but then want us to have their child go to SEVSEC, the Cannon Valley Special Education Cooperative, is that, and there's no space at SEVSEC, how does all of that work together?
So I'm going to break it down for you in a couple of different ways. One is that there are very few instances anymore where you can deny open enrollment. School districts can close open enrollment at specific grade levels, right? The board would have to take an action. You might say, we're closing open enrollment for fourth grade at Spring Creek. I'm not suggesting you do that, but that's the kind of action. And very few districts do that, but there are some that do that, right? Where they actually close open enrollment at specific grade levels. You are able to delay your decision for a certain number of days. I believe it's 90 days, so that you can evaluate how you might serve a student in that way. We've used that a couple of times just to make sure but you still do need to be able to say, can you open enroll or not? And almost always, if you talk to school district lawyers, they will tell you there are very few circumstances in which you should reject open enrollment under the law, especially with the achievement integration funding that we also receive, because that adds another layer to the open enrollment law. So the fact is there's very few circumstances where we have denied open enrollment. We do have some people who choose not to open enroll, as Corey had asked, right? If they say, I'd prefer to have this elementary school and we just can't, we say, you'll have this elementary school. Sometimes people don't come. Open enrollment has been a good thing for us in many, many ways. So there's those very few times where you would reject an open enrollment application. And I'm not going to get into the details of why you would do that. Typically around safety is what I would say. So the question about SevSec is a secondary question because students open enroll to our district. If they enroll to our district and they have a IEP that says they should have setting 4 services and they open enroll, then our setting 4 program is SevSec. And so when SevSec, the Cannon Valley Special Education Cooperative, it's a consortium of 4 different schools that come together for specialized special education services. So things where we can pool our resources to offer better programming in a more cost-effective way for students with what I would say are significant special needs. I think that that's fair to say. If SevSec does not have an opening, we have to figure out how to handle providing those services in our district. We have had in the past where we have had resident students whose IEP team felt that moving to a setting 4 location would be the best thing for that student's free and appropriate public education, but SevSec did not have enough room. And in those cases, we figure it out to the best of our ability until those students can matriculate to SevSec. There are certain circumstances where we might consider other setting 4 programs, but the open enrollment first to the district, and then we do what the IEP says. And if the IEP says it's setting 4, that's what we do, right? Or do the best that we can. So we can't really take into whether they prefer SevSec or not. That's not something that we're really able to do in a lot of cases. So I hope that's helpful. And I don't know, Sarah, Sarah Pratt is here. Would you like to share a little bit about your take on that part? Because Sarah does the work directly with people who are receiving special education services in open enrollment.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to clarify if I can. If a student is open enrolled to Northfield from one of the other 3 member districts in SevSec, there's a tuition billing system anyway, and it doesn't make a lot of sense because when we wouldn't deny. We would work with their resident district on that placement and make sure that that resident district is informed and aware of the need if they weren't already, because the tuition billing, the financial responsibility does go back to the resident district for that placement. And for those services. Another component with open enrolled students is transportation. And when a student open enrolls, even if they have special education transportation on their IEP, we are not obligated to provide that transportation. So the burden of transporting that student falls on that family. And sometimes that's not something that a family can navigate very successfully. So typically, we work with the resident districts if it's a student who requires setting 4 services. And we discuss that placement and the logistics of that placement. And if it's one of the other 3 member districts, and families find out that that resident district will provide that transportation if they stay enrolled in their home district, sometimes that sways that placement decision. Does that make sense?
Yes, especially if it's one of the other 3 districts, but if it's somewhere like
Mhm.
Randolph,
Mhm.
then we would still accept that student and do the best we could with that student.
Yes. Yep.
Thank you.
And I believe the other part to your question was, what if SevSec has a waiting list and there isn't a spot available? And we have an IEP team conversation involving the resident district, and we make the best determination about how those services are going to best be provided. Sometimes that's a shortened school day, sometimes that's home-based services. And if it's home-based services, we then work with the resident district to determine who's going to provide those services and what makes the most sense.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, absolutely.
Rob, did you have a question?
Just a quick question about the cross references. They're all to model policies. Are there any places where you have to fill in actual district policies?
Can you help me again, Rob? Sorry.
So after each policy, there's a section that's
Yes.
cross references.
Cross-referencing,
And
yes.
all of them are to model policies, whereas in other policies, there's cross references to district policies. So I'm wondering if that,
Yeah, I think we may have missed striking the word model. So thank you. We will make sure that we take a look at that. So we subscribe to the Minnesota School Boards Association and the Minnesota Association of School Administrations model policy handbook, if you will. So the benefit of that is that when there is a legal change or there's those other kinds of things, the MSBA, MASA team, it's MSBA Terry Morrow, typically leads that policy change process. Then they have their attorney make sure that they validate. And so we always, almost always start with the model policy. So we will just, because what we're cross-referencing is our policy. When they give it to us, they're making sure that they say that it was their model policy. So I appreciate checking that. We'll make sure that that gets crossed out so that it is just policy 506, student discipline.
Nice. Anyone else? On any of the policies? Okay, thank you so much. Item E is our fall 2024 bond referendum, an update to the board on the bond referendum informational campaign and highlight upcoming events.
Yeah, so I've been typically giving you an update about the number of people who have used the taxation tax calculator. The update I'll give you is not a ton of change. We saw those first reports they gave you, there was a lot of increase meeting over meeting. Now it's really evened off a bit, so we're right around that 300 mark. I don't have the latest data for you today, but I will have it for you at the next meeting. Couple of updates that I want to share is that we continue to see really good attendance on the tour. So a week ago tonight, we had 29 people on the tour on October 7th. That's outstanding. We did have much smaller attendance at our first Q&A. In fact, I think almost everybody in the room had been at some other presentation or some other tour, but people just wanted to come to hear what other people's questions or comments were, but a fairly small attendance. We have another Q&A session on October 22nd. Again, that's 7 to 8:15 p.m., more of a traditional kind of public meeting model. We do have another tour tomorrow night. So we want to make sure that people keep getting the information. We're just a few weeks from Election Day, and our mantra the whole time was to make sure that we gave people as much information as they needed to be able to make an informed decision. That was in a variety of different ways, in print, in presentation, in meetings, townships, service club, all those that we're up to 80 some events now. And again, our unofficial motto has been no stone unturned, wanting to give people the chance to have the information they need to make an informed decision. There are a couple of things that I do want to share with you related to the bond, one of which is about infrastructure, just to emphasize the challenges that we face. So just in the first month of school, met with Justin Robley today to go through that. There have been 3 air conditioning failures at the high school so far this year. One is in the upper cafeteria, one is in the kitchen, and one is in the auditorium. And so those systems are not functioning at 100% capacity. And these are systems that have been properly maintained. All the schedules have been appropriately done, just that they're at end of life. There's not much more we can do in these particular failure circumstances. So we are looking at the options that we have there at this time. And then something else that we've talked about related to question 2 is about activity space. And so I just want to share you some real data. So just a week or so ago, maybe a couple weeks ago, Aaron Bailey's team hosted the annual winter scheduling event. So they bring in the local youth associations to look at how much time would they like in our gyms during the week, et cetera. And so Northfield Youth Sports Associations who use our gyms in the winter, that's Northfield Basketball Association, it's volleyball, and it is soccer who wants to use our indoor space in the winter. Now, in a regular week, Monday to Friday, based on the building hours, there are 75 available hours to be scheduled. Those 3 associations requested 105 hours. So there's not enough time, right? We just don't have enough time with the gym space that we have to accommodate the requests from these associations. So what happens then is that they typically approve fewer hours for each of those associations. Most of the organizations don't get everything that they like. They also do things like move some community education classes that are not youth sports oriented. So one of the examples Aaron gave me is that they have a community education boxing class that typically would be in a gym. They've moved that to a cafeteria so that they can open up the gym for the youth associations. And so I give you those 2 pieces of just things that are real raw for us of the problems we are trying to solve with what is on the ballot on November 5th. So again, we got tours coming up. We have one more Q&A. I do want to emphasize 1 week from tonight, 4 o'clock, the information is on our website. We have been granted access to the Carleton geothermal system. And so professionals from Carleton, again, starts as basically from 4 to 6 p.m. You can get the details on our website about where we start. And we are going to be able to tour the Carlton geothermal system. We'll be able to hear from the leaders who run that system, who are responsible for its metrics. You're going to hear what it has done for Carlton for their savings and for their energy efficiency. You're going to actually get to go a couple of floors down below the ground to see the system and how it works. And so with question 3 really being focused on geothermal, we have really a nation-leading example right here with Carleton College that people can, it's hard to get your head around what geothermal is. I don't think a lot of people, most people just don't get what's it entailed. And so we're very fortunate to have this local opportunity for you to see what does the equipment look like, right? Probably at a larger scale than what we would have. What does it take to run it? What are the kinds of efficiencies they've seen? So if you have questions or people have questions about what that third ballot question means and what would we get out of it, we've talked about 25% utility savings is what WOLD estimates, about 60% energy savings, which is different than utility cost savings, but you'd have a chance to see it right in front of you what that geothermal system could do for us and what it has done for Carleton. So we just keep on moving forward, wanting to make sure that the public has the information that they need, and people have been very gracious and will continue to work all the way through Election Day. Then the voters of Northfield will give us our results, and we will take those results and we will do what we need to do next. So whatever the outcome, I think that the board and the district can hold its head very high that we are leaving no stone unturned. And so people should have the information. If not, there's still several weeks to go. Early voting has started. People can actually vote now, either here at City Hall or through their county. We've put that kind of information on the website. And we're just thrilled with the engagement that we've had so far and expecting more of it through Election Day. Be happy to answer any questions.
Very good. Thank you so much. You have a question, Corey?
Matt, concerning the question 3 piece, you had mentioned last week at the forum, estimate roughly what 25% savings would be, and then also what does that mean financially for the big picture?
I think the biggest picture, so roughly we've had a year where it was around $300,000 in utility costs. And so a quarter of that is just under $100,000. So not quite a full FTE of a teacher salary, but fairly close. So the other thing about utility costs that we have to, is that they can be different from year to year, right? So one year can be extreme, another year can be not so extreme, if that makes sense. So it's why we waited so long to try to commit to any kind of number, because we know year to year that could be very different. But in a year where we spend $300,000 in utility costs at the high school, 25% isn't quite a full-time teacher equivalent, but fairly close.
But why does that impact the budget? Let's say it's $50,000 or $100,000, depending on the year. Where's that money come from, and why does that matter?
Thank you for clarifying. It comes from the general fund. And so that's the key part, is that if you install geothermal, using a bond, we pay for that with the bond proceeds. So we tax, the bond money comes in, we pay the bond off, right? Separate account in and out. But the utility savings comes directly from the general fund, because we pay utilities out of the general fund. So it's a little different than your home, right? Where if you've installed a geothermal system, you've put your own capital forward, right? And you're banking on that month-to-month savings for what people call the payoff, right? It's a little bit different, because the taxpayers would be paying for the installation, the equipment, and all those kinds of things. Taxes come in, it's used specifically to pay our equivalent of a mortgage, but we get the energy savings and we get the utility savings from the general fund, which is the same fund that we use to pay teachers and all other school staff as well.
Very good. Anyone? Question, comment? Anyone else? No? Okay. Well done. We're on to item 7, which is our consent agenda. As a reminder, there were some personnel items in the table file added to the consent grouping. Is there anything anyone would like to pull from the consent grouping for separate consideration? Is there a motion to approve the consent grouping? Moved by Jenny, second by Amy. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item 8 is our items for individual action, and we do have a couple of resolutions that Val will help us with a roll call vote. The first item is Director of Student Activities John Mahal requests approval of the attached resolution supporting the district's application to the Minnesota State High School League Foundation for a Form A grant to offset student activity fees. I'll take a motion first and then we can discuss. I move to approve the resolution of the school board supporting a Form A application to the Minnesota State High School League Foundation. Is there a second?
Second.
second by, sorry, Corey. All right, is there any discussion on this item? And I imagine, Dr. Hillman, you'll be able to help us with that, or?
Yes, so there's two forms that you're going to be asked to approve application for tonight. Form A is to access money from the Minnesota State High School League Foundation to offset activity fees for students who are in need. So it allows us to have some offset of student activity fees. This has been something we've applied for some time.
Okay, any questions from the board? Questions? No? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Val, will you facilitate a roll call vote?
Butler,
Aye.
Gerwitz,
Aye.
Hardy,
Aye.
Nelson,
Aye.
Cornell,
Aye.
Gonzalez, George.
Aye. Okay, motion passes, thank you. So next is that Form B that Matt was just describing. So it is a approval of the attached resolution supporting the district's application to the Minnesota State High School League Foundation for a Form B grant to provide seminars, training, opportunities, or support for specific school functions for students, faculty members, officials, and others who are involved in athletic and fine art programs. Is there a motion to approve the resolution of the school board supporting a Form B application to the Minnesota High School League Foundation? Okay, by Jeff. And second? Second by Amy? Okay, is there anything you wanted to add? I feel like you described it just now well. Are there any questions from the board members or comments? No? All right, Val, can you help us with that roll call vote?
Butler,
Aye.
Gerwitz,
Aye.
Hardy,
Aye.
Nelson,
Aye.
Cornell,
Aye.
Gonzalez, George.
Aye. Okay, motion passes. Thank you. Our next item is an amended land purchase agreement. I'll take a motion first and then we can discuss. Is there a motion to approve the amendment to the Gleason Road property purchase agreement presented in this memorandum? It would extend the dates. Let's see, the board is requested to approve an amendment to the purchase agreement, which extends the dates of the contingencies and closing to June 1, 2025. Somebody move that we accept that extension. Okay, by Rob. Is there a second? Okay, Jenny? Right, Dr. Hillman, do you want to fill in, or?
Yeah, so the board has approved the sale of that very small parcel of land on Gleason Road out by the district shop. The buyer has asked, it's one of their first times developing property. They're learning what it takes to be able to get through some processes at various governmental agencies, and they just need some additional time to finalize what they would do before we can close on the property. So there's no change in anything other than giving a few more months for them to be able to, well, several more months for them to be able to close. So we're asking that we just push this out to June 1 of 2025 for the required closing date. And so everything else remains the same. Again, we're not doing anything different with that property in the interim. It's not a buildable lot, but the buyer has requested just an extension for the closing date.
Okay. Are we doing any winter expenses on it?
Nothing,
Like
we are not.
plowing, nothing?
No,
Okay.
it's even in that spot, if just, I can ask about, but it's in that spot where it almost appears to be in between where they would plow for Ruth's on Stafford and where it's almost like where they'd push the snow,
Sure.
so.
Okay. Anyone else, question or comment? Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, motion passes. Next, we have item D, a request for special services 1.0 FTE special education resource teacher at Spring Creek, presented this evening. I move that we approve the request as presented. Is there a second? Second by Rob. All right. Is there any discussion at this point about that FTE addition? All right. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes. Very good. Okay, next is our items for information, and we have an enrollment report. Dr. Hillman will review the October 2024 enrollment report.
So you have the first enrollment report of the year in your packet. That October 1st date is something that's really important to us because that is the date that the state will provide our funding for. And of course, as Val has shared with you, excuse me, in the past, There was a cleanup process for that over the years in terms of if you had more students, they will give you the additional funding in later years and the converse as well. So you'll see that our initial enrollment report shows that a grand total, including early childhood and part-time ALC students, at around 3863, with what you would consider to be K-12 sitting at 3712. Our projection for the year is 3729. So we're slightly behind that projection right now, but as you remember last year, we came out a little bit ahead of that. So that's a number we watch because of the associated projections with funding. Also on the second page, I want to point out that we've committed to talking about class sizes and to make sure that we highlight that at board meetings. And so if you followed, which I know you did, this report last year, you will see fewer, especially at the elementary level, you will see fewer numbers in that 26, 27, 28 range. We're able to add some FTE through some changes in funding streams that did not have necessarily an impact on the budget because it was money that had been allocated for something else. We were able to move it into new general education FTE without adding to the budget. It was a funding shift that the state had allowed. And so you'll see that we have a number of class sizes that I think are very attractive. We do have some that are in that 27, 28 range, but it's fairly few. And in some of those cases, we are experimenting with something, for example, at Bridgewater this year, that 4th and 5th grade, those are the areas where you see some of those higher class sizes. We're experimenting with a paraprofessional who's assigned to both grade levels, really trying to look at what are the kinds of administrative tasks that can be taken from teachers' plates so that the teachers can focus on the instruction, because we've heard from teachers when you hit that 27, 28 number, it is really about the extra stuff that comes with those students. And so we're experimenting with this, a little different use of a paraprofessional than we've seen in the past, but trying to see, are we able to make that modification, and is that helpful in a cost-effective way to support that teaching staff. So this is the first enrollment report for the year. You'll start getting these each month. We'd be happy to answer any questions to the best of our ability at this time.
Very good. Any questions from the board members? All right, very good.
Thank you.
Item B, on items for information. This is the National School Lunch Week. Will be celebrated October 14th through the 18th. The National School Lunch Program serves nearly 30 million children every school day. President John F. Kennedy created National School Lunch Week in 1962 to promote the importance of a healthy school lunch in a child's life and the impact it has inside and outside of the classroom. We appreciate and thank all of our child nutrition staff in our district. October 21 through the 25th is National School Bus Safety Week. School buses are the safest way for children to get to school. Their design is meant to be safer than any passenger vehicle in avoiding crashes and preventing injuries. Teaching children to follow safety rules on the bus is important, as it is informing drivers about the laws regarding school buses. We appreciate and thank Benjamin Bus and their drivers for their continued support and partnership with Northfield Public Schools. Item D, Comprehensive Achievement and Civic Readiness Presentation and Public Hearing. Hope Langston, Director of Instructional Services, will summarize the 24-25 Comprehensive Achievement and Civic Readiness Plan at the public hearing scheduled 5:15 on Monday, October 28th. This public hearing will precede the regular school board meeting scheduled on Monday, October 28th at 6 p.m. Our future meetings are regular meetings at 6 p.m. We have Monday, October 28th, a regular meeting at 6 p.m. and right before it will be that Comprehensive Achievement and Civic Readiness presentation. It is a public hearing. Both of those are here in this boardroom. Tuesday, November 12th, 6 p.m., our regular school board meeting in this boardroom. And then Monday, November 25th, 6 p.m., a regular school board meeting again in this boardroom. That is all the business that we have this evening. Is there a motion to adjourn? Okay, moved by Jeff, second. Second by Jenny. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, we are adjourned.